Today on The State of Us, Facebook undermined its own vaccine efforts. And what's next? What will we do about Facebook? Welcome to The State of Us. I'm Justin Weller, your host, and I'm joined by our friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson. We've got a lot to talk about as we've been covering the Facebook series. There's quite a bit going on. The Facebook files uncovered a number of things, and today we're looking at the last piece, which is how Facebook hobbled its own founders' ambitions to get America vaccinated. And more specifically, after we discuss that, where do we go from here? We've talked about all this stuff. You've heard Lance and I rail against what's going on at Facebook. Is Facebook who we should be targeting, or should we be upset with ourselves? Those are some of the questions we're going to try to answer today. Lance, what's our word of the day?
Meretricious. Meretricious.
That's a big one.
4 syllables. Meretricious. It's an adjective, and it means alluring by false or showy charms, attractive in a flashy way. Is that a descriptor of Facebook and what it tries to do? It says it's honest and open and wants to help the world, but is it causing more harm than good by being a little bit showy and attractive to people? And is it attracting the wrong kinds of people? That's kind of what we've been talking about. So meretricious.
So from the Wall Street Journal here, for more than a month, Facebook researchers warned that comments on vaccine-related posts, often factual posts of the sort that Facebook was actually working to promote, were filled with anti-vaccine rhetoric aimed at undermining their message, according to internal documents that were reviewed by the Wall Street Journal. The comments ranged from personal objections all the way to debunked falsehoods and conspiracy theories. And you might be sitting there wondering, well, how widespread are these really? I mean, is it really that big of an issue? Well, in the weeks before Mr. Zuckerberg made his announcement, another internal memo from the company showed that initial testing concluded that roughly 41% of comments on English language vaccine-related posts risked discouraging vaccinations. Users were seeing comments on vaccine-related posts 775 million times a day, according to the internal Facebook memo. Part of what happened as Facebook rolled all this stuff out is their system was catching a good bit of posts that originated that were specifically anti-vax or misinformation about vaccination, right? They were catching a lot of those posts. In other words, the initial thing going out on Facebook. The problem was that the comments on legitimate posts were not nearly as well, or in some cases, almost not at all, policed. So you could say whatever you want as long as somebody else started the conversation.
Right. I mean, when you have these meretricious ideas at Facebook, you draw attention to yourself, you get people interested, you're going to find those people then who will use that interest for their own means. And that's what's happened here. It's like, okay, we know that Facebook's going to take down our anti-vax post, but we can connect our comments to a positive post, and then our people who scroll and read the comments to the post, then we can get our message across, and we can undermine the system that way. And and that's just what happens. If you have something that is popular, people who will either A, want to take you down, or B, they will want to get their information out, and they will use your platform, in this case of Facebook, to get the message out that they want, because they know that you're getting many people to look at what you're saying. And so this is a good way to get people to see what they want people to see. So it's one of those, it's like a catch-22. On a good note to Facebook, they're realizing this, but now it's like, okay, how do we get this done, right? Because Mr. Zuckerberg's whole intent was, we want to push the vaccine. We want to be positive. We want to help. Not only did he contact the government, he contacted Dr. Fauci and said, what can we do? What role can we play to get people positive about the vaccine. They put ways to sign up to get the vaccine. But by wanting to draw all of this attention in a positive way, it drew all these people who were negative to try to stop Facebook from accomplishing what they set out to do.
Which builds on the special edition we did from last Saturday, right, as well, that focused on how Facebook wanted to make its platform less angry, but in reality, the opposite occurred, and actually it got worse, partly because of the shift. And it's interesting how this plays into what we're talking about today, the shift in the value of comments on different posts on Facebook, right? We talked about last Saturday, the ranking and the points that are assigned to different actions that are taken on a post. In other words, a like might be worth 1 point.
Mm-hmm.
A, non-premium comment, a comment that Facebook, for whatever reason, values as less likely to be valuable, may get 10 points. So a like gets you 1, and a subpar comment gets you 10, and a quality comment, I think that's the terminology, quality comment gets you 20. So in fact, there's incentive, right? And what's a quality comment? Well, we might be thinking, well, things that are, very relevant and timely on the post. Well, no, usually it deals with how engaging is that comment,
mm-hmm.
right? How many people react to the comment. In other words, thereby extending the interaction on a post, keeping people on the platform longer. Well, as we know from last week's episode, angry posts, or ones that stir deceit, right, or disinformation, such as anti-vax information, are the ones that are easy to grow in popularity very quickly. And I wrote down, Lance, something here because I think it's important that we take a minute to talk about it. As we've looked at some of these other things, it's interesting how Facebook has done more on this, right? And I guess I want to throw this idea at you and see what you come up with. I wrote down, when it matters to Mark, things happen. And what I'm getting at there is when Mark Zuckerberg cares about whatever the issue is, for whatever reason, right? Facebook clearly takes action. Now, the irony that's present here is even when Facebook takes action, even when it's something like this, and you might say, well, why is the vaccine thing so important to Mark Zuckerberg? Well, just to remind you, he runs a philanthropy with his wife that's focused on public health. So it's something they care about. It's something that they put a ton of their own money into, the whole notion of public health. And in fact, he's authored an essay, a lengthy essay on the value of vaccines and how the falsehoods about them are not true. So we don't know why exactly this matters a lot to him, but we know that it matters to him, the whole notion of vaccinating people in public health. Facebook takes action on this, but some of this other stuff we've seen, Lance, Mark doesn't seem as worried about it, so less happens. The irony, though, is that even though Facebook's worried about this, they don't seem capable of fully getting it under control.
Well, I think the simple answer is it's his company. He's the one that came up with the code that started this, 17 years ago? So, of course, what he's interested in is what the company's going to do because he's the company. That's the simple answer. The second thing I would say is he's kind of following, in my mind, what hit me was he's following in Bill Gates' shoes. Because when Bill Gates made all of his money, he got into health-related issues, climate, health, nettings to stop malaria, different things. And I think that's kind of, you have all of this money and you can't spend it all. You can't buy enough things. So you want to be seen by the public. You want to deflect from all the money that you're making and say, well, look at all the good that I'm doing. And where else can you do good other than in the health realm? It's just the nature of the beast, right? I mean, when you have a privately owned company by one person, obviously whatever they're concerned about is going to get the most attention. And then just very quickly to the point, yeah, I think they've opened a Pandora's box. I don't think this is what Zuckerberg had in mind, but this is what he's ended up with. And now he's got to do something about it to save what he started.
I think it's fair points, and it's what we're talking about basically coming up, which is this idea of where do we go from here? What do we do with Facebook? You've got all kinds of discoveries or uncoverings from the Facebook files. And the article even points out that Facebook's own research lays out in detail how its rules favor elites, its platforms have negative effects on teen mental health, and its algorithm fosters discord, and that drug cartels and human traffickers use its services openly, and anti-vaccine sentiment can run rampant. So there's clearly issues. And to Lance's point, I don't think there's anybody at Facebook who's like, oh yeah, we're really happy that we have all these issues with the platform. But the question becomes, right, where do we go from here? What do we do about this? Is the burden on Facebook? Is the burden on us as the public? Who does what? That's what we're talking about. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back. Facebook is no doubt plagued with problems and controversy. The question, though, is what do we do about it? Where do we go from here? And we left off last segment as I had posed the question to Lance, or I guess more of the thought about, what do you think about this whole notion that when it matters to Mark, something happens? But even when something happens, even when it's something that matters to the founder who wrote the original code, Facebook seems limited in their ability to do a lot about stuff on their platform. Now, in fairness, this article, and if you read it from the Wall Street Journal, the one about anti-vax sentiment, demonstrates that they take a very cautious approach to how strict they get with their content. So it is kind of a misnomer to suggest that they're not capable of doing more. The fear is that they don't want to accidentally take down stuff they shouldn't be taking down. So the question is, do you hedge toward the overly cautious or toward the more liberal approach of allowing more stuff out there and hoping that you catch it retroactively? The philosophy that Facebook has taken in the past is the retroactive approach of let's police it once it's out there, not necessarily before or as it's going out. The question, though, that we left off with, Lance, is who really is to blame? Because, I mean, you posed the whole thing about Facebook's a company, right? They're out here to make money. And that's what they're doing. They're making money. So, no, we may not like what they're doing. And I think they're so interwoven in the public space that we have to ask that question. Have they crossed the line between, can we allow them to continue just as a money-making endeavor? Or do we have to look at and say, you are having such a pervasive effect on society, it's time to do something?
I think Mr. Zuckerberg wanted to create this environment where the platform would be a voice of the people, the voice of the common man, where people could go and share their ideas and thoughts, and there would be the dissemination of these ideas, and it would be the greatest First Amendment thing ever because people could bounce ideas off of it and the discourse would lead to good things. Unfortunately, we live in a society, and maybe always the human mantra is, well, now I have something and I can take advantage of it and I can sway people and I can get power because power equals money or money equals power, whichever way you want to say it. And so there have been some bad things or negative things, I guess would be a better word, that have been done with Facebook. What's worrisome to me is not that these negative things have been done, but through the Wall Street Journal articles, Facebook knew that these negative things were going on and did nothing about them. That, I think, is cause for an alarm in that, and they're going to come out, and they already are, right? We've heard some ads on other shows that we've listened to or looked for information where Facebook now is in a very strong public relations push back. Look at all we've done. Okay. But again, they've done it all because one, they're so big, they have a lot of opportunities to do things, but they really haven't solved problems, and even to the point that they're looking at their Instagram for kids. We just read an article before we walked into the studio. Oh yeah, we're going to pause this And there's some pushback there because they're like, what do you mean you're going to pause it? You should get rid of it. Wasn't it enough? And I think that's concern, right? Is they're going to pause something when people have said the image that you're promoting to young people. You know, we talked about on the show Saturday, yes, image for young women, but also for young men as well. And so you're just going to pause it? Well, that just means you're going to come back and do it anyway. You're just going to try to make it better. And so there's been some pushback like, you need to get rid of it altogether. What do you mean you're just going to pause it? So I think we're still in the realm here. But again, if it's a public company like this, I mean, it's out there in the public, who's ultimately responsible for it? It's us. Because if you use Facebook or you advertise on Facebook or you do this or that, you're promoting those ideas.
Some illegal things may have happened, right? I mean, illegal things took place on Facebook, but the question of, is there anybody legally liable, possibly criminally liable, in Facebook's leadership? I think that question has to be examined. And you might say, well, that sounds extreme. But no, I mean, if you know, right? I mean, just my basic non-legal expert here, right? If you're aware that criminal activity is taking place and you allow it to take place, I'm not a legal expert, but I'm pretty sure that makes you complicit in that activity.
Aren't you at least an accessory?
I think there's that side, right? The potential criminal side here. And the other thing of, I think there's a case to be made for some of these Facebook people, including their founder, that testified before the United States Congress. I mean, I don't know. I guess we'd have to go back and watch those testimonies. But from what I recall, having watched them, I feel like some of that stuff was pretty much an outright lie. That under oath, before the United States Congress, these officials flat out lied, saying that they didn't know or didn't have access to or weren't really sure. And I mean, everything that we've seen the past couple of weeks we've been sharing with you seems like that's bogus, you know, and again, either you really didn't know, in which case you got some serious problems in your company, or you did know and you lied, bold-faced lied to the people of the United States and Congress, which, by the way, is illegal. You can't do that. Well, you can, but there are repercussions for that. So outside of those questions, right, about the complicity of Facebook leadership in these crimes and their possible lies before and under oath, right? Aside from that, I think there's the bigger question of, okay, well, you can do all that, but somebody else is going to replace these people, right? Fine. You prosecute them, you replace them. Somebody else comes in. Somebody else is here to make money. What do we do about the larger societal issue of Facebook and social media? This challenge of they are such a defining point of everyday life for the vast majority of Americans. I think two things that we have to talk about. One, is Facebook and therefore its subsidiaries a monopoly? And two, is Facebook and its subsidiaries a public utility? Because these sound like, you know, if we had talked about these even a few years ago, I think everybody would have initially been like, that's crazy. You know, of course not. Absolutely not. They're not a public utility, you know, and they're definitely not a monopoly because there's other social networks. Let me just share a couple pieces with you for folks to think about as we go into the next segment here, okay? The dictionary definition of monopoly is the exclusive possession or control of the supply of a trade, of the supply of or trade in a commodity or service. A commodity is a raw material or primary product that can be bought and sold. Now, they give the examples of copper and coffee. But, and this is where the relevancy comes in economics, a monopoly is a dominant position of an industry or a sector by one company to the point of excluding other viable competitors. And you might say, okay, but Facebook doesn't really deal in products because its services are free. Our data and our attention.
Yep.
And there are several types of monopoly, Lance, one of which is called a social monopoly, which is, as it sounds, the monopolization of people's social attention, right? Or social life. And I think you'd be pretty hard pressed to tell me that Facebook does not monopolize our free time. Pretty sure they do. But does that mean it rises to the level where the government needs to do something? Think about that here for a minute. And the other thing, thinking about, right, do we rise to the qualification of a public utility? Well, a public utility is an organization supplying the community with basic necessities. Now, the examples: electricity, gas, water, or sewage. We've talked about the internet being a public utility, right? Is the public square, which is now online, a public utility? Not saying it is. We're asking the question. Let us know what you think. Send us an email, podcast@thestateofus.org. Is Facebook a public utility? Find out. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back. Is Facebook a monopoly? Is it a public utility? We'll just turn it over to the friendly redneck liberal. What do you got for us, Lance?
I'm going to say no on both counts. You basically said with the public utility, it's a necessary thing. Okay. You had me start a Facebook account because of some things, back at the beginning of the year to see how many friends I could get to release content or whatever. But I don't check it. I don't use it. I never used it before that. So it's not sewage, electricity. It's not necessary for my life. And that was your definition of public utility. So I don't think it's necessary. So therefore, I don't think it fits that definition that you gave of a public utility. The monopoly part, it's a little interesting. For our history people, you may not know this, or if you're a little older, you know that, Bell Telephone Company was broken up as a monopoly. The reason you have Sprint and Verizon and AT&T and all of those different phone companies now is because the government deemed that Bell Telephone and Technology was a monopoly. So do I think that you could make the argument that Facebook's a monopoly? I think it's getting close to that. I think the government could file some antitrust lawsuits, and 20, 30 years from now, we could get some readings on it, and all those lawyers could collect money from it.
No on the public utility front, but yes on the monopoly front.
I don't think it's a monopoly. I haven't heard anybody who's really complaining that they can't get into the market. I mean, there have been people that have got into the market and Facebook bought them out. That doesn't necessarily make me a monopoly. It means I started something and somebody thought it was a really good idea, and so they bought me out and I made money off of it. That sounds like capitalism. Now, you could say, now if they monopolize the market, that means that somebody tries to go into the same business or the same area of business and they can't compete because Facebook does things that doesn't allow for the competition to exist. That's my understanding of monopoly, and I don't think that's the case yet. I think there are still people out there who are doing things like Facebook or off of the idea of Facebook, who are still starting up companies and have IPOs on Wall Street and are making some money and doing some things and making some starting up companies. So I don't think that Facebook necessarily fits the definition of a monopoly. However, as you said, Facebook has the attention of Congress, of governors, of state attorney generals, and those are the people who have the power to cause Facebook a lot of trouble. So I'm not saying, yes, it's a monopoly. I'm saying I think we're going to see the political world make some movement that way because it's going to be good PR for them at this point in time.
There are a lot of different ways that antitrust laws can apply to a company, right? And one of the items from the Federal Trade Commission, which is the department in charge of protecting America's consumers, points out that a literal monopoly does not have to exist in order for antitrust laws to apply to a company. If the attempt to monopolize exists, that can be enough.
But that's what we want, right? Isn't that competition? Wendy's, McDonald's, Burger King. I mean, it's like, we're going to make the better burger. We're going to have the better fry. That's all part of it.
But and the key here, right? The legal side, the key is to the benefit of the consumer. I don't think that what Facebook is doing is to the benefit of the consumer anymore. In other words, the downside of what Facebook does outweighs the positive benefit to the consumer.
You mean knowing when your friends' birthdays are and telling them hello and posting pictures on your vacation so your friends know what you're doing? They're not doing anything of any value.
No, I said
society?
less value. The harm is greater than the value. The value of being...
But how many people that use Facebook don't have a body image issue? How many people? I mean, we're only concentrating on... And this is a great discussion, by the way. I mean, I'm enjoying this. This is getting my juices flowing, because I'm not saying I'm right. I like the back and forth here, and I want to hear from you in the audience. Either agree with me or disagree with me, but have the conversation. But are we accentuating the negative aspects of Facebook and forgetting the positives? So are the negatives 40%, but the positives of Facebook 60%? Then your argument that it's more negative than positive isn't true, because there are a lot of positive things that are happening with Facebook. Facebook itself is promoting all the positive things that it's getting done. So yes, negative things are happening because of Facebook, but are the negatives out? I'll throw it back to you. Are they outweighing the positives?
The amplification and the ability to sow dissent, deep, strong dissent, in many cases that is amplified well beyond what it would be without Facebook's existence, at the core of the American democracy, I think far outweighs the positive benefit. I agree, Facebook has positive benefits. I mean, I've said for years that I think we're too harsh sometimes, especially adults who don't understand different forms of social media, on that, social media is only negative. Social media, or social media's online platforms, were very important to me, especially when I was younger, especially when I was trying to figure out who I was, right? Having access to those resources was important. In fairness, though, back then when I had access to them, they were not even close to the behemoths that they are today. And today, about 7 in 10 Americans are on Facebook. 70% of the American public uses Facebook. So I guess it's just such a different thing than saying, I have this website where I go talk to some friends. Because it's not just a website where you go talk to some friends. It's a website where you're exposed to lies and falsehoods from sources on a regular basis that you've never heard from. You're exposed to angry content. You're exposed to things that may harm your self-image, and you are unfairly exposed to those more than the positive stuff that exists, which is a perversion of reality. We know that the vast majority of stuff that takes place on Facebook is positive stuff, but the vast majority of what you see is negative stuff.
Isn't that your choice? Do we want to allow the government to get into what's my choice at what I look at or how I communicate? Or, I mean, that's a hard one for me, because I'm one of the 30%. I don't know. I guess I probably count as being part of the 70% that's on Facebook, but I don't feel like I'm on Facebook. But it allows me to remember. I guess it's an easier way for me to remember when my nieces and nephews' birthdays are, so that I can send them a message. But would I do it anyway? Yeah, I would do it like my mom did, or like my grandma did. I would write all their birthdays down on a calendar, and then I would have a bunch of cards, and I would write a little note and send it to them and mail it to them snail mail, like my grandma did for every one of my birthdays. Okay. So there's ways to do this without Facebook. So does that mean Facebook doesn't have the right to exist because it's just taken the place of something that concerned, caring people used to do and have just made it easier? It's like there's nothing new about Facebook. We did things like this before. So it's all we've done is make it easier, make it more public. And is that illegal?
When the government broke up the telephone company, I'm sure you had old timers at the point who were arguing, I don't have a telephone. I don't need a telephone. I don't care if people have a telephone.
No, 98% of people in America had a telephone when that happened.
But
so that's bigger than your 70%. 98% of people had telephones in their homes.
But I don't think the telephone has the same negative or positive effect, maybe positive effect, but maybe not the same negative effect that social media is having on
people don't
society.
Get on the telephone and talk negatively about it and spread rumors on the telephone. Have you not?
Yeah.
Do you not know any elderly people who?
But I'm not
going to say ladies because old men rumor monger. As bad or worse than women do. Women get a bad rap on that one.
The telephone does not inherently have the capacity to amplify negative messages. There has to be, every time a negative message is amplified on the telephone, there is a conscious human decision to amplify that negativity. On Facebook, there requires zero conscious effort to amplify negativity. Facebook does that on its own through its algorithm, whether or not you want to see it. Now, yeah, you can choose to leave Facebook, right? But if you're going to be on Facebook, your ability to control the negative stuff you interact with is limited.
Isn't that your choice, though? If you choose to be there, then you're taking the risk.
If you understand the risks, which is why we
don't make people understand anything.
Wow. We've created an entire government agency that's literally dedicated to trying, not necessarily succeeding, at transparency with consumers about the products they use. And I think probably arguably one of the least understood items that we use the most is social media and technology.
But it still falls on the individual. I can print up all the stuff all the transparency thing, all the things, all the information, Blue. I can print up all the information. I can give it out there. If people aren't going to read it or look at it or believe it, does that mean the system has failed? It just means that individuals have decided, yeah, I'm going to do this anyway. Okay. Do you have the right to make bad mistakes? I mean, do we really have to tell people this coffee's hot? I mean, I think that's dumb. And again, I've enjoyed this conversation because this is what gets my blood flowing, But I don't need to. I mean, I hope my coffee's hot. That's why I ordered it. I wanted a hot drink. If I didn't want my coffee hot, I would have ordered ice water. So I mean, if you go into this and you know the inherent risk of Facebook,
but I don't think people do.
Well, that's their fault. Why do we have to attack the company, the individual who started the company, because people aren't going to do their personal due diligence?
So it's people's fault if they go buy a burger and somebody put something into it that they shouldn't have put into it, and now you get sick, but you should have known that this burger was from somebody who had malintent, and it's not our fault, the government's fault, that you just ate a burger.
But we've not proven that Facebook had malintent.
Well, but I'm not sure that you could prove that people with the food products.
You just threw some stuff in there that we didn't talk about. Nobody said that Facebook is doing this on purpose.
No, but they're not doing anything to fix it either.
Well, they're not reacting as quickly as you and I would like for them to react.
Yeah, or to the extent. I think here's the thing, right? If monopolization's not where it's at, which, I mean, I agree, it's legally dubious whether or not they fit the definition. I'm sure there's clever lawyers out there who could make a really solid argument for the fact that they do, and there's ones that could make a really solid argument for the fact that they don't. I think this goes back to what we've talked about a lot of times on this show, which is there is zero doubt in my mind that I want a United States Congress to take up serious legislation regarding the age of the internet and social media. The last time we did it was over 20 years ago. And things have shifted a little bit since then, not the least of which is foreign entities with the capacity to manipulate the very things that we're supposed to be using as democratic forces to alter or at least inflame our elections. And that's why I don't know how to state the importance of social media in our world, because I don't know if it's fair to say that it's like anything that we've ever encountered on its level of pervasive and manipulative capacity. And I agree that for the most part, most of that's not intentional, but it's the way that it's been built. And I don't know exactly what we do about it, but I do know that I 100% not only want, but expect my elected officials to do more than they're doing to regulate this industry.
Good discussion today, folks. I mean, if you can't tell, there's different sides being presented here. You haven't listened very closely, and I know you do. So, but that's our mission here at True Chat, is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And on this issue, obviously Justin and I disagree on what to do about it. But I will say that, it's scary, but does it fall as illegal? So, if you please share with us your ideas, let us know how you think, tell your friends about us. Hopefully you've enjoyed this special episode. You can find us on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, and everywhere podcasts are found. And up to this point, I threw a shutout today with Meretricious. I think that's 3-0 by my score. So the first shutout in show history.
I know, 3-0. That is what I had down as well. So I caught it twice, and I had a time where I wanted to use it too, to talk about meretricious ideas that Facebook allows on its platforms. But I thought the different definition that I came up with when I searched meretricious was interesting. Apparently attractive, but having in reality no value or integrity.
That fits as well.
Is Facebook meretricious?
I think so, but that's why maybe I'm not as upset about this as you are.
I think
it's not as important.
I guess the thing I want people to keep in mind is, because Facebook's not that important to me either. If it went away tomorrow, I'd probably be okay. The entire generation of people growing up right now that have never known a world without Instagram. So I don't know if it's for me and Lance as much as it is for who's next. But I think it's a conversation we're going to keep having.
Right. Working for future generations. That's why we exist, right? I mean, I hope so.
Well, yeah.
That's what I've done in
supposedly
tried to do.
Remember, new episodes of The State of Us, Tuesdays and Thursdays as a podcast. We're also heard on the weekends in select talk radio markets. So check your local AM or FM station and see if they carry The State of Us. For The State of Us on True Chat in Urbana, Ohio, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to our producer, Bradley Butch, and thank you all, our audience, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.